Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome back to episode 81 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting and changing the current hypey marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business, one that's aligned with your values. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer. So that's someone who's working for an organization in the marketing department, for example, and you just have this feeling that marketing could be more gentle. The way your company talks to your customers could be more gentle. So if you are a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 P's of the Gentle Marketing Mandala. And if you're new here and don't know what I'm talking about, you can download your one-page marketing plan with these different kind of P's of the gentle marketing approach at sarahsandcroce.com/one page. That's the number 1 and then page. And this comes with 7 email prompts to really help you reflect on these different P's. So today's conversation fits the second P, the P that stands for personal power. And this is such a big part of becoming a gentle marketer. And in the book, I have an entire part dedicated to rumbling, being, becoming. And that starts with learning and knowing who you are. And so today I'm talking to Leslie McDaniel, a personal and professional development coach and personality type consultant. And in this conversation, we cover Leslie's fascination with personality assessments, how she got into really discovering the MBTI and facilitating it, the story behind the Enneagram, another one of Leslie's fascinations, and then at the end, Leslie is actually giving me a mini coaching session, kind of a sample of what she does for clients to define or find out whether I really am an INFJ or maybe an INFP. So we talk quite a bit about these last 2 letters, the J and the P. And it's really fascinating to me. And I've become kind of really addicted to these personality assessments myself. I talk about it in the Gentle Marketing Revolution book. And I also just recently launched a Gentle Marketing Superpower session with me where we dive deep into your marketing activities and find the ones that you could focus on because they are naturally flowing and giving you joy. And so prior to the session, I always ask clients, besides reading the Gentle Marketing book, to also take several personality tests and fill out a workbook that'll give me valuable info on the client. And that really helps me understand who they are at their core and how I best serve them and how we really, find out what the gentle marketing superpower for this person is. And I'm telling you all of this because A, it fits here, but B, also because right now, as I said, I just recently launched this, and until I booked 10 of these and gotten 10 great testimonials, they're only $125 before I then double the price and then probably double it again. So if you're curious and would be interested in finding more about it, you can go to sarahsandcroce.com/superpower and just be aware that this is a secret sale. So on the website, on the buy button, it still says buy for $250. But if you click on that, you'll notice then that it's reduced to $125. Okay, so back to Leslie. Let me tell you a bit more about Leslie. Leslie is a personal and professional development coach and personality type consultant. She coaches creative and ambitious people to tap the potential of their personality type for the purpose of living a more meaningful and purposeful life. She's passionate about bringing greater self-awareness and understanding to the world by helping others view themselves through the lens of their personality type, Myers-Briggs and Enneagram systems. So without further blah blah, let's dive in and let's hear this conversation between my friend Leslie and me. Hi, Leslie. So good to speak to you today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to hang out. And we have this, time difference that we need to juggle with, but we'll make it work each time.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm super excited to talk to you. This has been kind of on my list for a while now. And, you know, over the last few months, especially, but even before, but over the last few months, even more, because I wrote about it in the Gentle Marketing Revolution book, is that this idea of the personality tests that has become just like a fascination for me. And
Yeah.
so, when we first talked, you were like really focused on MBTI. And so we're definitely going to talk about that. But then there's also all these new things that keep popping up. And one of the favorite small ones that I have my clients take is the Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you know that one?
Yeah, I do. I don't know much about it. I think I'm a questioner in her framework, but
Yeah.
I really don't know what that means. So,
Yeah, I think it has to do with that, with how you kind of integrate habits. So it's really, I don't know if you've read the book Atomic Habits. I can't remember the author right now, but I think it would be a good kind of follow-up test for that, because it's all about, how do you get things done. And the questioner, for example, is you're always questioning yourself and, why do I need to do this? Or, like, how come this is like this?
uh-huh.
And so I'm between a rebel and the questioner, and the rebel is kind of like even even questions things even more. And it's not just, I think it's like, you're really, if someone was going to tell you you should be doing this, then the rebel goes almost against it, where the questioner is like, why should I be doing this? So it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's just fascinating, those different types. And
Mm.
obviously there's quite a few of them that are kind of silly, like some of the Facebook stuff that you see there, like these personality assessments are just plain silly. But this one I thought was
Yeah.
quite researched. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a similar fascination with personality assessments, and so you really took some time deepening this knowledge. So tell us a bit about your journey and becoming a Myers-Briggs type indicator practitioner, and then later on an integrative Enneagram accredited practitioner. So tell us about those two in
Yeah.
your journey.
Yeah, I'm definitely fascinated with personality type. And, when I first decided to build a business around a specific personality type in the Myers-Briggs system, I knew I needed to expand my knowledge, not only of that type, but of all the types in the system, just to really clarify my own understanding so that I could help people using that framework. So that was my first sort of motivator to go get the official Myers-Briggs training. So what that training did was allow me to, be able to officially administer the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or MBTI tool.
Mhm.
And it really is very assessment based, right? So it was about learning how to use the assessment, how to interpret the results, how to lead people through it, and so on. Then that was quite a while ago. And then fast forward to last year, 2020, I did go and I learned about the integrative Enneagram IEQ9 assessment. And I was really interested in it because although my personal perspective on assessments has shifted over the years, this particular one stood out as one that I thought could be really accurate and actually for an assessment be a good tool. So particularly for the Enneagram, which is a very complex thing, which we can talk about if you'd like. But so
Definitely.
last year I went and got the integrative Enneagram IEQ9 training to become an accredited practitioner to use that tool to help people identify their Enneagram type. So those were really very, two very specific tools that I wanted training in because I think they're helpful as a starting point, especially to help people figure out their types in those two systems.
Hmm. Yeah, I think most people by now are probably aware of the MBTI assessment. That's kind of probably it was like the first one that became really popular, especially also in corporate situations.
Mhm.
Uh, I quit corporate a long time ago, but I know my husband once had to take it, and so it's like this tool that's kind of done the rounds and is recognized. But so most people are probably aware of it, but maybe we can just quickly summarize it before we talk a bit more about the Enneagram, because I'm really curious about that one too.
Yeah, so you're right. The Myers-Briggs tool has been around for a long time. It has decades of testing, validity, and reliability, and all that. It has gained popularity, just the Myers-Briggs, using that in quotes, because there are many free assessments out there that claim to give you results in that system. Although they're actually kind of one of the really most popular free tools out there is based on it's like an amalgamation of a bunch of different systems, including Big Five. So it's even though they use the same letters as a Myers-Briggs tool. But going back to what
Mhm.
MBTI is, the official tool is to help people figure out their 4-letter code in that system. So there's 16 different types, as people are probably already familiar with. And taking the tool, the MBTI, helps you figure out which is your best fit type in that system. And those letters are kind of code for helping you understand how you make decisions and how you process information. But the really important piece of those 4 letters is what's underneath. So the 4 letters are like the tip of the iceberg, and it's the cognitive functions, which are based on Carl Jung's work. That's underneath the surface, and that is really when you get into a more complex understanding of how a person makes decisions and their learning style, and just the dynamic way that their brain is wired. So yeah, that's kind of a quick, really quick summary of the Myers-Briggs type indicator tool.
Yeah. And so you and I share the type, right? And you actually made a business based
Mhm.
on this type. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, I first began to build a business around serving INFJs and INFJ women in particular. And, I've been asked many times, why? Why did you choose that? How did you know? Why just women? All these different questions. And I really didn't have a great answer, except I just knew that was the right thing to do. I think it was an intuitive insight. It came to me and it just was something I did not question. Speaking of being a questioner, that one actually felt just, it was like the path was laid out in front of me. And so from that point, I dove into just immersing myself in INFJ knowledge and experience with others and helping people understand themselves, helping women particularly understand themselves as an INFJ. What I found is that there's so much mistyping, not just with INFJs, but that's a kind of a big one when there's a lot of mistyping. So I was drawing other people to me who resonated with what they thought an INFJ was. And so but I also enjoyed serving and helping them as well. And specifically helping them clarify their type first so that we could then use that, in their coaching. And so that has led me to sort of, expand. I'm in the process of continuing to expand, and I work with really any type who resonates with me and what I have to share and offer. I typically have NF clients, clients who have the N and F in the middle of their 4-letter code. But yeah, that's kind of, how I started and how it's progressing over the years.
Sounds like you basically discovered that there's some limitations, or these
Mhm.
4 letters are kind of limiting, right? Because
Yeah.
we can't just put people into boxes and say, well, you're that. And so everybody else is
Mhm.
probably not like me, where there's actually like yeah, these gray zones in between where, yeah. And so from there, how does the Enneagram kind of help you also probably draw another picture or a different picture,
Mhm.
taking from, for example, the INFJ, you probably realize that they're not all the same. Enneagram is based around numbers, right? So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that not every INFJ is the same number. Is that
No,
correct?
and that is correct. And there are many people who are trying to figure out the overlaps between the two system and oh, if
Yeah.
you're this type, you must be this type and
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs and so forth. And I would say, just to go back to what you said, I do think there's a perception that these 4 letters or this number in the Enneagram put you in a box. I would say that actually, like an accurate understanding of your correct 4 letters, like the right type for you, is not actually limiting. It's actually freeing. When you find the right type, it just gives you such an incredible understanding of who you are and how you're wired. And I think the limiting piece is just, some types don't like to be limited. So they're automatically going to reject something like this, a label, right? And then speaking of the Enneagram, I don't remember which book this is in, but, there's this idea that the Enneagram shows you the box that you're already in. With the Enneagram, it's like a symbol that has 9 points. This is just very surface level, top level understanding. But each of those 9 points has a particular ego fixation, or what we would call a passion. And that is something that actually drives us unconsciously. Like it's an underlying motivation, everything we do. And a lot of times we're not even really aware of that. So that's where the idea of like, we're already in a box of our personality structure when we're talking about the Enneagram. And the idea is to understand that and uncover it and start to see it everywhere and how it's playing out, so that we can, separate the space between, whatever kind of trigger might activate that passion and our response. So we have a space in between there where we can actually choose and make a more conscious decision about how we want to live our lives, if that makes sense.
It does. I guess the boxing, or the idea of people rebelling against this box, is if we read our profile and we feel like it's negative, then we feel like, oh, but that's not me. I need to get, I don't want to live my life like that. I don't accept to be in this box. So does that mean that I can't remember taking the Enneagram, like exactly what it had said in the description. All I know is I remember saying, that's definitely me. And I think it felt positive, because it felt like, oh, they're describing me, they're reading my mind. So I didn't feel like it was somehow limiting. Could it be that other kind of profiling is sometimes being turned into the negative, and then people feel like, oh, there's resistance, I don't want to be labeled in that way?
Yeah, I think it's complex, people's responses to these types of things. I think that also there are many, myself included, there are many people who have lived their lives or are currently living their lives in a unconscious way. And so sometimes they're not actually aware of those quote negative things about them. So there is some people have talked about like, oh, Myers-Briggs is positive and it shows you your strengths. Then Enneagram is negative. It shows you how you're terrible. That's just a summary. And that's not actually true. But the Enneagram certainly highlights some sometimes rather unpleasant and not so complimentary things about us. Highlights
That's
a lot of
it.
that,
I
actually.
didn't know how to kind of formulate it, but that's exactly what it felt like to me. It's like, whoa, did I really want to hear that? but yeah, it's the unconscious thing that you're like, all of a sudden it becomes conscious because you're reading like what's going on in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there can be definitely a rejection of that, as you were talking about, because it just depends on if you're ready to hear it, if how much of a growth mindset you have. I think there's a lot of factors that can impact how a person receives that information, and which then can determine whether or not they think that is their correct number, if we're talking about Enneagram. And that goes back to this whole idea of an assessment, or a journey figuring out your type on your own, or working with someone. Like, it really is a longer term process, and just having the number or the 4-letter code is not useful. It's only useful if you take that information and apply it. And I know that's what you've done as well. Like when you've talked about using it with your clients, like you want to have that kind of foundational understanding to know how to apply it. And that's what I'm passionate about, not just identifying the number or the 4 letters, but helping people use it in a way that helps them take control of their life, or make their vision a reality, have more purpose in their life, these things that people really want, but they often are not sure how to get there.
Yeah. Just a kind of a follow-up question to the Enneagram, like who invented it? Who came up with it?
Good question. I don't know. It's kind of a mystery. It's said to have ancient roots, and I'm not super into like history of things typically, but I do know that like in the modern era, what we know is the Enneagram and our understanding of the Enneagram was brought to us, by some like philosophers, teachers, and psychologists such as George Gurdjieff, Oscar Achazo, and Claudio Naranjo. What we understand as the Enneagram today, they were kind of responsible for introducing it to us and developing it a little bit more in our quote modern era. I think there's a lot of different perspectives of how, it originally began, and there's no one point in time that we can point to and say, oh, there it is. It wasn't there, and now it was. Now it is, Yeah.
But it's different from the numerology, right? It's not the same.
Yes, it's different. It may have, I don't know all the mystical roots and ancient roots that it has that have informed it. I think there are many, but the Enneagram itself is its own structure or framework, I guess, if you will.
So fascinating. You just also recently added another certification to your list, and it's called the Personality Hacker Certified Profiler. So, yeah, tell us what that is all about.
Yeah, so I'm big fans of Personality Hacker. It's Joel and Antonia, and they are also about utilizing Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram to a degree for personal development. So actually applying the knowledge. And I'm actually in an advanced course beyond what I've already taken with them right now to hone my skills as a profiler. And so what that means is that to help people find their type in the Myers-Briggs system now, or to understand the cognitive functions that they're using, I do more of an interview style conversation with them. I don't utilize the assessment, the Myers-Briggs assessment anymore, because there are limitations. And in a forced choice assessment, there's no option to ask why, or for a person to dig deeper, and to explain why they chose the answer they did.
Right.
And as a profiler, I've learned the process of being able to talk to people, ask them questions, and then identify the cognitive functions they're using by going deeper, asking, ask a question and say, well, tell me why. Why did you say that? Or have you always been that way? So it allows me to naturally observe their decision-making and learning processes. So I think that that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to that training, because first of all, I'm big fans of a Personality Hacker and the way they approach type development, but also just really clarifying, helping people actually find their true type. As I mentioned, there's lots and lots of mistypes because there's so much misinformation out there. And if my purpose is to help people use their type for growth and development, we have to start with the correct data, right? The right type to begin with. And the profiling process helps me do that, helps me help people find their best fit type.
Wow. You know what I'd love to do, Leslie, is actually like do a mini kind of consultation right here, like show us how this would work with, some questions, because I think you're right. It's basically taking it from theory into something real, right? Where it's not just, stamp, here are your letters, but no, it's like, again, if you're a questioner, well, you're going to question this type. And if you're a rebel, then you're like, but why? For example, for me, I'm an INFJ. I'm pretty sure about the first three letters, but the J, the J that stands for judging, as a rebel, I'm like, but I'm not judging. Why do I have to have this J in my four letters? So I'd love to, just kind of take me through some of your coaching to figure out whether, this really applies here, the J compared to a P.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Before we kind of dive into that, I want to just say that, typically the way that the profiling process works would be that I don't focus just on the dichotomies, like asking questions of whether you're an E or an I, S or N. T or F, J or P. I do some of that. I probably do the least amount of those kinds of questions with the JP dichotomy. And the reason is because I'm looking for the order of the cognitive functions that you're using. And so, and the letters, the 4 letters fall into place once I identify those things, which functions you're using in which position. So I'm just prefacing this by saying, I would, if we were actually going to do a profiling session or a type consultation, I'd take you through the whole process just to assure that you're utilizing, the INFJ functions, which are totally different than the INFP functions. Even though there's only 1 letter difference between the 2 types, there are, like I said, they're not using any of the same functions in the 4 function stack.
So what you're saying is basically we can't just take one letter. It's an entity, the whole thing. And so we're kind of like skipping the first 3. You're not going to get the real big picture, but just for this episode's sake, that's what we'll do. Right?
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm, like I said, totally happy to do this. I think I can ask some clarifying questions for sure, but I wanted to clarify it's kind of more of a holistic process, looking at at the whole picture. So yeah. Okay. So my first question would be, why are you torn between these 2 letters? Like, what is it? You mentioned that you don't like to be labeled as a judger. So tell me a little bit more about what you think it means to be a judger, why it's bothering you, and what maybe attracts you to what you think a P type would be.
I think it's the word itself, honestly, like this idea of being a judger, that just is, if we think of the term, probably not as it's meant to be used in MBTI, but in the term of how we usually use it, well, judging is not exactly a good thing to do, to judge other people based on their appearance or race or whatever. So I think it's really that I'm like, why are we using that term, and what does it really mean in the MBTI language?
Yeah. So that makes total sense. That term judger, it doesn't actually mean that you are judging people. So that's good news for you. So we can clarify a little bit later what that actually means. But so thank you for clarifying that. I think that this is going to be good for you then to help you understand a little more about what that means.
Right.
But just to make sure that is, before we talk about the main difference, just to make sure that is what you're using. Tell me a little bit about how comfortable are you when you don't know what to expect?
Very uncomfortable.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, I like to plan things. I like to be in charge. I like to be in control. And so, yeah, things that are uncertain make me uncomfortable. Something like there's obviously small things, like even just the idea of what are we going to eat for dinner. Like my husband doesn't understand that creates anxiety for me, not knowing what I'm going to cook for dinner, and then going to the kitchen and I'm like, oh, what am I going to cook? And so that's been a conversation in our house very often. Or obviously bigger things as well, where I remember when we lived in California, he had his job assignment, and then we weren't sure whether we were going to move back to Switzerland or whether the company was going to send him. Like once it was Italy, then it was Singapore. And I was like, well, I need to know. I need to plan and, kind of get organized. So that was very, very uncomfortable, a few months, and not knowing what's going to happen. So yeah, that's how I respond to that.
Okay. Yeah, got it. So you really want to be in control, and you don't want uncertain situations, from as small as what you're going to eat to as large as like where you're going to move. Okay. Yeah. So I just want to ask a couple more questions, because that's a pretty clear indication of one letter over the other, but just looking at that information alone. But how do you feel about, or like, what's your relationship to chaotic environments?
Like chaotic environments, like in terms of like noise and just chaos, like with people, or like order? What do you mean exactly? or
Yeah, it's
either?
however you want to interpret it, because that gives me information too.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm my office, if I'm looking at my desk right now, my husband would probably say it's pretty chaotic. Like I'm not an orderly person necessarily, but chaos in terms of too much noise or just like too much, yeah, too much spontaneity, that drives me crazy as well. Like, that to me, yeah, that creates chaos in my life when people just show up out of nowhere and and I'm like, could have called. So things like that creates chaos in my life.
Got it. Yeah. And so thinking of your desk, you mentioned, or your office area, you said it's not orderly. So what's your threshold for disorder and kind of chaos in your work environment?
I would say it's a creative disorder. Like it's still, compared to like when I look at my sister or my dad's desk, that is chaos to me. To
Mhm.
me, things are still in place. They have their place. But my husband's desk is completely empty. So I need creativity, and so there is stuff on my desk, but it's not like a big mess and piles everywhere. So I
Mhm.
would say that's my threshold. I need to feel like there's life, but
Mhm.
not chaos.
Okay. And when it gets to the level of what you would consider chaos, like specifically in your work environment, how does that impact you?
I want to just draw back and, yeah, need quiet.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
especially human chaos drives to, or yeah, leads me to overwhelm. Like human chaos is I can deal with material chaos, but human chaos is very overwhelming to me.
Yeah. And you said that you would draw back because you need quiet. And why do you think that you need quiet if your office gets to that level of chaos for you?
I guess it's just because I don't feel like I'm in control anymore.
Mhm.
I lost control, and that's not a good feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I need to
The
regroup and get control back.
yeah, regroup internally. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And does it impact your sort of ability to think straight and to kind of be able to process your thoughts and all of that as well?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I could ask you many more questions just, on this dichotomy, but pretty much every answer you gave me indicated the J side. And the difference in J and P is not, whether you judge people or not. It really doesn't have anything to do with that. It really, what it indicates is where you want organization, structure, where you want things decided. And when I say where, I mean, do you want it in your external world or do you want it in your internal world?
Ah,
Everyone wants structure and organization somewhere, and everyone wants freedom somewhere.
right.
The difference is that J's, because they use an extroverted judging function, it means that they want their external environment to be orderly. I'm saying that in quotes because there's a span here as far as what we mean by orderly, but we want that to be a little more organized, to decided, structured. And the reason is because of what you just said, because you feel out of control if your external environment's chaotic, whether it involves people or not, not knowing what's coming up, it just feels chaotic. You're not in control. And if you were a P type, then you would much prefer, well, let me go back and finish the J. So you want that external organization and structure in your external environment, and you want freedom in your internal world.
Hmm.
So all J's want their external organization, internal freedom. P's want the opposite, P types. So all P types want their freedom in their external environment. So they actually enjoy for the most part, spontaneity. You even said,
Mhm.
like, I don't like spontaneity.
Right.
I want to know what's coming up. They would enjoy a little bit more of that, question of where I'm going to move and what might be coming up. Or they could just kind of more go with the flow with it.
Yeah.
And that they want and have structure in their internal worlds more than J type. So that's really the main difference, is where your structure and where your freedom is, where you want it. Oh, go ahead.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Sure.
What does that mean for the P's to have structure in their
Mhm.
internal world?
Yeah, I'm not a P type, so I have spent a lot of time trying to figure this out myself.
Yeah.
But it really is, it's an organization of thought. I guess the best way to explain it would be how I experience having a thought and being interrupted. And I would assume, have the same in all J types. So if I'm having a really interesting thought and I'm following this, line of idea or thought or whatever, if I get interrupted, it is really, really difficult to get back to that. And that's because it's not in this orderly way. It's a lot more free in my mind. And that's why J types tend to really, 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 really dislike. I'm saying really, really, really because I'm an IJ type, and our types dislike distraction the most, but our interruptions. But it pulls us out of that. So it's really hard to get back because it's not like in an organized way. A P
Mm.
type, on the other hand, they might not like interruptions as well, and they might at times struggle to get back to their thought, but it's not in any way the way that we would struggle with it. It's just more organized. It's not like a card catalog of thought. I think that's the best way for me to explain it without really, I can't really comprehend what it means to have an internal organization because I don't have that. And it just seems foreign to me. I think just like, of course, a P type could understand organization in their external world because they can see it and visualize it. But yeah, that's kind of the main difference. Does that clarify it all, or is that more
Yeah, it
confusing?
does, and at the same time, I feel like, oh, that would be an interesting conversation to have with a P
Hmm.
type. My husband is
Hmm.
definitely a P, so I think it
Hmm.
would be really interesting to analyze this and say, well, so how does this look inside of you?
Hmm.
Because yeah, it can definitely relate with freedom inside. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And my husband's a P type as well, too. And I've asked him the same. And,
uh-huh,
mostly around this idea of interruptions, like, can you
uh-huh,
get back to your thought? Like,
yeah,
do you feel like for him, it's more like his feelings are organized internally? There's like this internal
yeah,
web of it. And so it
uh,
kind of depends on which function you're leading with, how it's organized, which cognitive function you're leading with, what kind of information is you're focusing on as you're sort of organizing and structuring that. But hopefully that's clarifying to everyone and not too abstract. But yeah,
yeah.
that's a
I love
difference.
that. This is amazing, and I think yeah, oftentimes we hear people talk about all the different types, but I think it was really interesting to go deep into just J versus P, or we could have
Mhm.
picked two other letters, but it's just
Mhm.
nice to have this. So thanks so much for being willing to go into that. That was awesome.
Yeah, and thank you for being vulnerable in your answers. I didn't know you didn't know what I was going to ask, so thank you for being open with us on your experience, at least with that dichotomy.
Yeah. What would you say are the benefits of like really knowing your personality type, and not just knowing the letters, but really understanding the nuances?
Mm. I think the purpose and the benefit would be something I mentioned earlier about just that increased consciousness, having a greater understanding of yourself and others, and utilizing that consciousness, that awareness to create the kind of life that you want to live, to live a life of purpose, fulfillment, or, whatever it is that you want to have in your life. I think it's a framework that provides a roadmap in some ways, guidelines for helping you know how to get to that place by understanding how you work on an intimate, deep level.
I agree. I find it fascinating that, I'm 45, and I probably started finding out about these personality assessments maybe 10 years ago, but before
Mhm.
that, there was really not much talk about them. And here I am, I have an 18-year-old son, and he came to us last summer, I remember we were in Sicily at a pizzeria, and he's like, "Oh, I just took the Enneagram. Let's all do them." And so we were sitting there waiting for our pizzas, and we all did and it was like the most beautiful conversation. "Oh, so what are you? Oh, yeah, that makes so much sense." And
Yeah.
and so it's just fascinating that this young generation, that they grow up with that information. They have so much more access to things like that. And I think it will really help them, like you said, in their paths, and really owning and being aware of who they are.
Yeah. And, for my type, I would imagine you as an INFJ are the same as well, but to facilitate understanding between
Yeah.
people. And, when I first started, that was kind of one of my main motivators, is to really help people understand themselves and others, but the dynamics between them, and help, increase our willingness to see things from other people's perspective and understand why people are doing certain things.
Right.
And maybe that goes back to my questioner, perspective.
As
But
well.
yeah, I think that just helping, I think we could avoid so many things that our world struggles with if we just could have patience and willingness to dive into how we're different from each other, and how to have greater understanding and empathy for people. Like, I know it's a very idealistic way of viewing the world, but I truly believe that it's true. And so start small, start on a small scale, and do what I can do to help facilitate that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This has been an absolute delight. Thanks so much for joining us and taking the time to talk to us. And that mini coaching session was just wow. I loved it. So, Leslie,
Yeah.
tell us where people can find out more about you and how they can work with you.
Yeah. So the main place to go would be my website. That's lesliemcdaniel.com. And on there, they can see my services, which includes, I work one-on-one with clients in personalized coaching relationships to, as we said, help them understand themselves through the lens of personality type, and then to be able to use that information to take a bold action on living a life of greater purpose. But in addition to that, I also work with people to help them clarify their types. So I do a personality type consultation, a much larger version of what we did here today, for their Myers-Briggs type. And then I also administer and help debrief the IEQ-9 assessment for their Enneagram type. And I also have a membership community. It's not currently open for new members, but if they're interested in that, that's called Hello Personality. They can send me a message on my contact form on my website, and I'll be sure to let them know when it opens up next.
Wonderful. That's great. I always like to ask the last question as well. And that is, what are you grateful for today or this week?
Yeah. I don't know. Would it be too much to say I'm just grateful for this conversation? I think a bigger picture, I'm really grateful for the connections that I've been able to have lately, and community. And I think it's facilitating some growth in me, and it's helping me to, post-pandemic, which we're not through it yet, but, helping me to get back to developing and deepening my relationships with others, which is what's really important to me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being on the show, Leslie.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and mini coaching session and found it hopefully also helpful to you. That's why I really focused in on 2 of the letters, so that you can find out for yourself whether you're more of a J or more of a P. And I'd love to know if you want to reach out to me and leave me a voice message at sarahsnfcroce.com/ask. You could let me know and just tell me, or tell me and Leslie, how this resonated and whether you kind of identify more as a J or a P. Thanks so much. You'll find the show notes of this episode with further links at sarahsnfcroce.com/GBR81. Do check out Leslie's website at lesliemcdaniel.com and consider doing a profiling session with her. She really is the expert at this. And if instead you'd like to work on your unique gentle marketing superpower based on your unique personality, then check out the details for my limited time offer at sarahsnfcroce.com/superpower. Next week's episode is about the P of people of the Gentle Marketing Mandala, and I'm going to be speaking to Ellie Trier about communities. can't wait. In the meantime, let's be the change we want to see in the world. Speak soon.